Raji's dad's tax fraud. Raji never thought his life would take a turn for the criminal. Sure, he'd bent the rules a couple of times, sneaking into movie theaters, hacking Mikey's phone to play pranks, but nothing serious. Until the letter arrived. Mikey was sprawled on the couch, tossing a baseball in the air, when Raji's dad walked in with a stiff expression and a government-issued envelope in his hand. "We have a problem," Dad muttered. Raji sat up. "What kind of problem?" Dad threw the envelope on the table. Mikey grabbed it first and read out loud. "The IRS demands immediate payment due to fraudulent tax claims?" Silence. Raji's mouth fell open. "Dad, did you commit tax fraud?" Dad rubbed his temples. "It was an accident." Mikey blinked. "How do you accidentally commit fraud?" I don't know," Dad stammered. "I just may have stretched the truth on some deductions." Raji groaned, running his hands through his hair. "How bad is it?" Dad took a deep breath. "Hundreds of thousands." Mikey choked. "Oh my gosh." Raji shot up from his seat. "We're going to jail." "No one is going to jail," Dad snapped. "Not if we fix this." Mikey grinned. "Oh. Are we planning a secret operation?" Raji frowned. "That's not how taxes work." Dad sighed. "I just need help sorting everything out. I need to prove that some of my deductions were legitimate, or..." Before he could finish, the doorbell rang. All three of them froze. Dad grabbed the letter, shoving it into a drawer. "Act normal." Mikey whispered, "What if it's the IRS?" Raji glared. "They don't do house calls." Dad opened the door and immediately turned pale. Standing outside were two men in suits. Federal investigators. Raji's stomach dropped. One of the men flashed his badge. "Mr. Patel, we'd like to ask you a few questions." Dad gulped. Sure. Can we do this later?" "No," the agent said. "Now." Mikey whispered to Raji, "Is this the part where we run?" The courtroom was packed. Raji and Mikey sat near the back, nervously watching their dad adjust his tie as he stood before the judge. "This feels like one of those movies where the hero loses everything," Mikey whispered. Raji glared. "Not helping." The prosecutor stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we have gathered overwhelming evidence that Mr. Patel has knowingly committed tax fraud by falsifying deductions over several years." Dad sweated. "Your Honor, I swear this was an accident." The judge raised an eyebrow. "An accident that saved you hundreds of thousands?" Dad winced. Mikey leaned toward Raji. "You think Dad has any chance?" "Not unless he has some kind of miracle defense," Raji muttered. That's when Dad's lawyer stood up, a tired-looking man who clearly had seen things. "Your Honor," the lawyer said smoothly, "while mistakes were made, we argue that Mr. Patel did not intend to deceive the government. This was a miscalculation, not a scheme." The prosecutor scoffed. "A miscalculation?" "He wrote off his entire backyard as an agricultural expense." Mikey snorted. "Wait, he did what?" Raji buried his face in his hands. The lawyer sighed. "While the deductions were unusual, we request leniency. Mr. Patel has already begun repayments." The judge tapped his fingers on the desk. I've seen worse cases. But tax fraud is serious. Raji tensed as the judge glanced at Dad. I'm sentencing Mr. Patel to 500 hours of community service and full repayment of the fraudulent funds. Dad exhaled. Thank you, Your Honor. Mikey grinned. Hey, at least he's not in jail. Raji groaned. Yeah, but guess who's gonna have to hear about every single hour of his community service? Mikey smirked. That's a you problem. Even though Dad had avoided jail time, Raji and Mikey could not accept defeat. Dad, Raji said, arms crossed, we cannot let the government win. Mikey nodded dramatically. We need a plan. Dad groaned. Guys. You're not doing anything illegal. Raji smirked. Who said anything about illegal? We just need creative solutions. Mikey rubbed his hands together. We're about to outsmart the IRS. Dad sighed. I regret having children. Phase 1, the fake evidence factory. Raji and Mikey needed proof that Dad's tax deductions were legitimate. Step 1. Fake receipts. Mikey grabbed an old printer, typing out incredibly detailed documents proving that Dad did, in fact, need his backyard deducted as an agricultural expense. Mikey's logic: technically, grass is agriculture. Raji agreed. We can also say Dad donated thousands to a charity like, the Save the Local Pizza Shops Foundation. Perfect, Mikey said. People love pizza. Dad held his head in his hands. Phase 2, the misdirection strategy. The IRS investigator was coming back for another review. We need distractions, Mikey said. Raji nodded. We hit them with chaos so they stop paying attention to the fraud. Step 1. Mikey unleashed 3 raccoons into the office before the meeting. Step 2. Raji activated every single fire alarm in the building. Step 3. Dad pretended to faint dramatically. It worked. The investigator, exhausted by the disasters, sighed and simply approved Dad's financial reports to avoid further headaches. The victory celebration. We did it! Mikey cheered. Dad wiped his forehead. I'm never doing my own taxes again. Raji raised a fist. We outsmarted the system. Mikey grinned. And we saved the pizza industry. Dad groaned. I'm banning both of you from ever touching finances again. The brothers high-fived anyway. Just as Raji and Mikey were celebrating their victory, the front door slammed open. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Police officers stormed into the living room. Hands where we can see them, one of them shouted. Raji and Mikey froze. Dad paled. Oh. Hi, officers. The lead officer held up a file. We received new evidence that suggests your tax situation may have involved fraudulent documentation. Mikey nervously chuckled. Define fraudulent. The officer squinted. Forged receipts, misdirection tactics, and releasing raccoons into a government building. Raji groaned. Dang. We should have used fewer raccoons. Dad sighed, putting his hands up. Guess this means I am going to jail. Mikey grinned. Hey, at least it's a cool crime. As the officers handcuffed Dad, Raji shook his head. You had one job, Mikey. Mikey shrugged. It was fun while it lasted. The courtroom felt all too familiar. Raji and Mikey sat in the back, watching as their dad once again stood before the judge, the prosecutor already exhausted from the sheer absurdity of the case. Mr. Patel, the judge sighed, rubbing his temples, this is the third time you've been here regarding tax fraud. Dad laughed nervously. I know. Crazy, right? The judge glared. No, Mr. Patel. Not crazy. Illegal. Raji whispered to Mikey, this is literally a déjà vu nightmare. Mikey nodded. At this point, Dad should be a certified tax criminal. The prosecutor stood up with a stack of new evidence. Your Honor, he began, frustration in his voice, we have found even more fraudulent deductions that Mr. Patel attempted to claim, including, but not limited to, listing his family dog as an employee, declaring his backyard as farmland again, attempting to write off video game purchases as educational supplies. Mikey choked. Wait, hold up, he tried to expense our games? Dad sweated. I thought it was a valid educational tool? The judge sighed deeply. I've had enough of this circus. The cycle begins again. Verdict, Dad was found guilty again. Raji groaned. That's it. He's done. But instead of going to prison, Dad was somehow given yet another chance to pay back his debt. And again, Dad tried to fake receipts. Again, the IRS caught him. Again, they went back to court. Again, the judge sighed deeply, already expecting the fraud. At this point, the prosecutor just showed up with pre-filled paperwork for Dad's inevitable trial. You're repeating the same crime over and over, the judge shouted during the fifth trial. Dad sweated. I mean, fifth time's the charm? The judge slammed his gavel. No, it is not. This time, there was no escaping it. Dad was forced to sell his home, his car, and even his prized collection of limited edition socks to pay the IRS. Mikey gasped dramatically. Not the socks. Raji shook his head. Mikey, that's not the biggest problem. Mikey shrugged. Yeah, we lost everything, blah blah, but those socks were rare. The end of everything. Dad stared at his empty home, now sold. Mikey and Raji sat beside him. Well, Dad muttered. That could have gone better. Mikey smirked. Could have gone worse. You could have ended up in jail. Raji groaned. He should have ended up in jail by now. Dad sighed. Guess I'll never commit tax fraud again. Raji narrowed his eyes. You're saying that like you would have done it again if you hadn't been caught. Dad didn't answer. Mikey grinned. So what now? Dad stood up, dusting himself off. Now, we rebuild. And we never mess with the IRS again. Raji rolled his eyes. Finally, some common sense. Mikey patted Dad's shoulder. At least you still have us. Dad stared at them for a long moment. Then sighed. Great. My only remaining possessions. Raji groaned. We're not possessions. Mikey winked. Speak for yourself. I'm priceless. And so, after 6 ridiculous trials, losing everything, and learning absolutely nothing, Dad was finally free. Well, except for that small unpaid fine that the IRS definitely wasn't forgetting about.